I had you raise quite a pertinent question, Mark, as to when we are ever going to be a debt-free country, when we'll ever break even, if at all we'll ever break even, and when we'll get to a point where we can actually breathe a sigh of relief, even as taxpayers, saying that, or seeing that the taxes that we're paying are actually going into good use. And I'll start with you, Madam Boss Sholei, on the question of looking at how the revenue has been divided. 30% of that budget, despite the fact that it's 3.02 trillion, a huge, humongous amount, 30% is going towards development. The rest is going towards recurrent expenditure. And I normally try to break it down to a very simple format. If in your own household, from your income, if 30% is what is going towards savings or developing the home, then chances are you will never get out of where you are at the current state, because 70% is going towards paying the house help, paying for rent, paying for fuel. There is no chance of development. So when I look at this budget, despite the fact that it has been targeted to the poor, my concern is that we seem to be digging deeper and deeper by the day.
Yes, and actually in what was lacking in the statement by the budget reading by the CS was the explanation of when he says we are putting this much money in housing, the housing pillar. Then he should tell us it will improve the economy by this percentage, which then will allow us, enable us to pay this percentage of our budget faster. Or by this time. I would have wanted him to talk about when he goes to the pillar on manufacturing and infrastructure. He should tell us the roads being built, the SGR is going to generate so much and improve our economy, reduce inflation, and so on, and link it. Because the borrowing is not a bad thing. But if you're borrowing in order to generate more money than you have to repay, then it makes sense. So, those are the parts he needed to give us an explanation on. But that was a gap, he basically says, okay, we are going to put a subsidy. I think the only one that he gave us actual figures was Rivertex, where he was saying Rivertex is going to employ 3,000 people. At least he gave a figure on that. On the issue of, when he talked about universal health care, again, universal health care is not making sure that everyone is insured. It's also about preventive measures of making sure people are not sick. So I would have expected to see very serious concern on food safety, because all what the challenges we're having with cancer and all sorts of diseases has got to do with the amount of pesticides uncontrolled that is being flooded into the country.
Okay, and because of time, I want us to just share the time equally. Ruth, let me come to you. And are you concerned that such a huge budget, we have very high salaries, we have very huge loan repayments, basically telling us that development is something that is taking the back burner, which is what some would see as the ticket that we have for us to be a better nation tomorrow and the years after?
Yes, for me, my biggest concern is when a budget does not take care of the poorest within the society, when a budget actually appears to be subjecting the poorest, the most vulnerable in the society, to further taxation. The ordinary citizen is already feeling the pressure of having to pay a lot of taxes as it stands right now. And when you start introducing taxation, when you introduce insurance premiums for border operators who earn very little money, essentially what you're saying is that you're going to push them out of business. And what this does is that in essence, when you push these young people out of business, when you push young people who resort to outside catering as a means of making money, as opposed to looking for jobs, and you begin to tax them, heavily tax them, then you're going to drive them out of business, and hence deepening unemployment within the society. So for me, my biggest concern is that we are borrowing we are borrowing to repay money that we have borrowed in the past, and we are shelving development projects. And also my other concern is that have we done an audit of previous development projects that the country has undertaken and actually come to say that this is the value that we got for these projects, so that even as we are talking of more and more mega infrastructural development projects, can we be able to say that this is the amount of money we have been able to raise as a country from the previous development projects that we have undertaken, so that we can justify further budgetary allocations to these mega infrastructural development projects.
Okay.
So I think we need to really have a retake on infrastructural development projects, and as Mheshimiwa has said, what is the point of investing in infrastructural development projects when you cannot say that this is how much money SGR is going to give us?
It's going to give us. It looks like there's no thinking or planning towards it. David, is the whole budget doom and gloom? Sometimes we sit here and we literally tear it apart as though there's nothing good out of it. Is there anything that you pick out of it that is good?
Yes, Mike. I started by pointing out the things that I thought were useful. But you see, the good things come with a bad side also. So you have the Ajira platform, for example, which is key for creating opportunities of employment, so that when someone comes in, you have, you know where to get a plumber and where to get an accountant and where to get an IT geek and where to get a media person. If you're a media house, you just get in and fetch what you think is the best. And yet on the lop side is that you force these people to pay 10,000 before they are part of that platform. So they can't just go there. But then also the risk is, what are the vetting mechanisms to ensure that we don't end up with frauds in that platform? Because that's a problem we have as a nation. So that's a wonderful thing. So you then have, an allocation towards the Big Four agenda, which I think is a good thing. But increasingly, I'm starting to think that the president should either run with health as his major agenda of the Big Four, or health and food security, for Gladys's sake, before she hangs me. And because I suspect that in 3 years, it is possible to achieve some agrarian revolution of sorts. Ethiopia did it in more or less the same time. In 5 years, Ethiopia came from a hunger-stricken country in which hundreds of thousands of people had died because of hunger, to a point where they were now exporting food.
Malawi did it in 2 years.
Malawi did it in 2 years. Botswana is an example to copy from. And so I'm thinking, sometimes when you spread yourself too thin, you're unable to achieve. And you get to health. Health, universal health care, is a very useful thing. How I wish that at the end of the President Kenyatta's tenure, each one of us will be able to state that, you know what, thanks to President Kenyatta, now we can be able to afford healthcare. Preventive is great. The real deal, though, is to be able to afford to pay for your healthcare when you go to hospital. When you go to Kenyatta Hospital and you look at the facilities in there and you look at the equipment that is needed, some they use are outdated, some of them are up to date. You go to the Kenyatta University Hospital that was opened the other day, and this should be close to the heart of the president, because these are institutions named after his father. It should count for something. And so I hope that when we talk about healthcare, up to and including devolving funds that will necessitate healthcare management at the very basic levels of dispensaries and health centers, that should be useful. But is it a good thing that we have allocated some money towards the Big Four agenda? I think it is. Does it have sides that I do not agree with? Of course I do not.
It does.
When you say that we will have SMEs given sufficient resources, that's a wonderful thing. But when you create a bank to be able to do that, instead of compelling the banks that currently exist to work within frameworks that can necessitate SMEs accessing loans that are affordable to them, then I think you are just creating an opportunity and creating